Dr. Luce,
David.
thank you for coming in.
Absolutely.
Had fun talking to you before.
Yeah.
Would Dr. Luce just tell us your full name, where you were born, a little bit about your family, your parents' name? Is there any medical relationships with the family and why?
None whatsoever.
Okay.
So Ed Luce, obviously. I was born March 5th, 1940, Syracuse, New York. My father was a sort of low-level executive with the airlines, American Airlines. He met my mother in that role in Buffalo. In my early childhood, because he began to ascend a little bit of the lower rungs of the ladder, we moved a lot in my childhood. Eventually settled in Southwest Ohio. Between the two of them, they had 7 children. I'm the oldest. And I've often said to my father, just in jest, when he was alive, is that, you know, Dad, if you and Mom would have stopped having children, we could have probably been a little bit up there in terms of the socioeconomic strata. But it was a great heritage. An Irish Catholic family, actually, and there's some great stories that stem from that heritage, which we don't have time.
How'd you go into medicine?
Well, that's a great question. I read a book when I was in junior high, I believe, and it was about the tribulations of a woman trying to restore her husband to some level of sanity. And that, so many of us, that's how, in some way, we elect medicine because of some really relatively minor experience. You know, either we're taken care of by a primary care. But anyway, so I decided I wanted to be a psychiatrist. Now, I'll tell you, that lasted until like the first 2 weeks of med school. But that was the initial drive.
Okay. You went to med school at?
University of Kentucky. I was a member of the second class. And again, this was a socioeconomic decision. My parents had actually moved to northern Kentucky because my dad ran the American Airlines part of the airport, but the airport's over in Kentucky. So when the med school started, they granted scholarship to anybody who was a resident. And in addition, they gave me a sort of a minor scholarship as well. So I had no tuition at all during the 4 years of med school.
Okay. So you were going to be a psychiatrist. That went out in 2 weeks.
That didn't last.
You read enough of Freud and figured.
Yeah, right. I don't want to be deprecatory, but I actually met a couple of psychiatrists. And I thought, well, I just don't take this as part of my personality.
Well, they say people go into fields of medicine because they want to cure something about themselves.
Yeah.
Exactly. Maybe you said, I don't really need that. Right. So you went into surgery, but did you know you wanted to be a plastic surgeon at that time?
Well, it's a little more complicated than that. So my first surgery rotation as a med student, this is what I wanted to do. And our school was sufficiently small that there was only 60 people in my class. There was only 40 in the first class. So we could establish strong relationships. And mentoring has been a very important part of my life, of being a mentee. And the chief of surgery was a Ben Eisman, who actually became a giant in U.S. surgery. But I got to know him reasonably well. So when we would be done with our med student rounds and down in the cafeteria having a quick breakfast, Eisman would come down and sit at the table with us. So he proved to be a mentor for me. And I guess it was my senior year. I hadn't decided on a career in surgery. And my senior year, I went to him and I said, Dr. Eisman, I've got this elective for 2 weeks. I want to do something in surgery. What do you suggest? And he said, well, I've just hired this plastic surgeon from North Carolina. He's not going to have a great deal to do, but why don't you spend a couple of weeks with him? And that was Paul Weeks. Paul Weeks came, and he was straight out of residency with Earl Peacock. And it was such a great 2 weeks. I mean,
I interviewed Paul Weeks, I believe.
As one of the icons?
Yes.
Yeah, it's too bad you couldn't have interviewed Earl Peacock, too, because
I know.
That would have been a great opportunity.
He would have told me what his opinion was.
He would have sailed off in this way. Anyway, so I decided I wanted to be a plastic surgeon. So I went back to Dr. Eisman. I said, Dr. Eisman, I think I want to be a plastic surgeon. I mean, you could see his crestfallen. I mean, it was, here I was, you know. He said, well.
What year was this?
That would have been 65.
Okay.
Early 65, maybe late 64. And he said, well, you need to train at Barnes Hospital. And he said, that's where the real giants are. And he said, that's where I trained. It was good enough for me. It's good enough for you. I said, okay, Dr. Eisman. So, you know, those days and age, I mean, even though there was a match, you know, I matched at Barnes. And true, Brown was there, and McDowell, who was the editor of the Journal, and Minot Fryer, Louis Byers, who was one of the best technicians I've ever seen. But they were all somewhat long in the tooth and really cranky. So I thought, I don't think this is not what I want to do, I think. I'm going to be a cardiothoracic surgeon. So then the next step in my evolution was they decided they wanted a full-time plastic surgeon to replace these 4 guys who actually were all in private practice. And they hired this guy from Hopkins. His name was Jack Hoops. So when Dr. Hoops arrived, he's my second mentor. When Dr. Hoops arrived, he did the same thing that Paul did. I mean, he opened the whole vista of what's possible in plastic surgery. And the rest is history.
So, Dr. Luce, you've been around long enough as I have. You've seen momentous changes in plastic surgery. There have been paradigm shifts. I just like, in your words, obviously your words, what you think about them, what you how they've affected you and your practice and your life.
Well, I mean, I've never fully grasped the meaning of paradigm shifts, to be honest with you. Or how it definitely applies to us, but I guess I think about it more as tectonic plate shifts. Okay. You know? So if those plates shift suddenly, it's an earthquake, and that's probably analogous maybe to a revolution in our specialty, and we've had a couple of those. But more commonly, the plates are moving a little bit more slowly. They're just sort of grinding away underneath that. So if you stop to think about it, the truly big revolutions that have hit plastic surgery in the past X number of years have been microsurgery, right, and craniofacial surgery. Now, I don't do the second one, so actually I don't do the first one, but I'm impressed by those people who do. That's a more narrow spectrum of our specialty than microsurgery. So microsurgery came about really about the same time as the myocutaneous revolution, and they enabled each other in many ways. Mm-hmm. So I think the first shift was the combination of microsurgery and myocutaneous. So if you stop and think about it, what we do today is breast reconstruction, that would have not been possible without the advent of the tram flap with Carl, the hard tramp, and the advent of the latissimus with John Boswick. I mean, that served as the foundation for everything that we do today in terms of breast surgery. Obviously, Radovan and expander was an essential part of that. So that certainly has been a major tectonic or paradigm shift.
Okay. What do you feel has been your greatest professional accomplishment?
Well, I mean, I guess, you know, on reflection, it was the opportunity and then ultimately our capability of the switch to board-selected case reports. Now that may strike you as somewhat strange, but if you think about it, when I came on the board, it was candidate reports. So they would bring in these glossy case reports, and they would be in these huge albums, but it didn't really tell us much about the guy or the girl, right? I mean, it didn't really. Obviously and I did that. You may have done that.
I did.
Yeah, obviously I selected my best cases, you know. The guys still
We
found.
were going to select our worst days.
Yeah, what I could do that. So, and obviously that was enough grist for the mill, and then they could still ask us questions. So when I came on the board, they put me on the oral exam committee, and Ron Bergman was chair. And Ron came to me the very first thing and said, "I've got a job for you. I want you to figure out how we can examine for ethics on the oral exam." It's interesting, we've come full circle and we're still trying to do that. He said, we've put in a couple of questions, but they're not functioning because the sociopaths know the right answer, so it's not functioning right. I said, okay. He said, I want you to go to this little retreat that the combined boards and RRCs are having in Chicago, because I'm too busy and I don't have time, so I want you to go. I went, and there were two presentations there. One was from orthopedics, and orthopedics was trying to deal with how they could have a case list of what their candidates did, so they could at least look at that. OBGYN was selecting out some cases that they wanted to talk about with the candidates, but they did not ask them to prepare anything. So I came back to Ron, I said, here's an idea, let's do this. Why don't we have them submit a case list, and we can pull cases out prospectively in advance and have them put together and bring those cases. And he said, well, that's an idea, let's see if we can sell it to the board. And to the guys that were chair of the board at the time, I think was John Woods, I can't recall. And eventually Ron, that sailed, well, it didn't exactly sail, actually. It was much more difficult than that, but eventually it was approved. And that served as a foundation for what we do today, which is,
Which is massive, because they submit everything now.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work for the board, but it's a much better insight into who you have sitting across from you that you're going to examine with those case reports. So.
This is a somewhat tough question, but what do you feel is your greatest mistake that we have made as a specialty?
Yeah, well, it's a good one. About 90 or 91, we have this thing of putting together organizations that come apart, So we put together something called COPSO. COPSO stood for the Congress of Plastic Surgery Organizations, and it was the first effort to build some sort of ecumenical umbrella kind of organization. And I think Ron was the first convener, but I was the second convener. And I really wanted us to embrace the concept of specialization. I really felt that that was important. And the reason I thought it was important is because I could see the schism that was beginning to develop between cosmetic and reconstructive surgery. And I thought if we could embrace the concept of subspecialization in cosmetic surgery, I hit it sort of underneath the Trojan horse of hand was well down the road, but hand and craniofacial. Mm-hmm. And somehow I don't really fully comprehend, but we would all agree, in people who attended COP. So we had people from the board, we had people from the RRC, ASPS, ASAPS was sort of a fledgling organization, but they were there, they would all agree. But then when they go back to their parent organizations, that ship scuttled on the rocks. Okay. So if I look back, I think those are wounds that still haven't healed today. I mean, those are wounds that between the two big organizations. So I think if we could have been successful, we could have negotiated with other specialties from a position of strength. So that's a disappointment.
We discussed a little bit. We don't have to go into deep, but a paradigm shift when you're talking about when you said, well, or tectonic shifts, is how cosmetic has separated from the basis of who we are. They took the name reconstructive out. Because they thought, we need to be more the American Society of Plastic Surgeons. And a lot of people said, no, we're the American Society of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgeons. And maybe that wheel, as you said, will come full circle again. When there's a plastic surgeon in California, there's one on every street corner. probably 2 in every building.
Yeah.
So
Driving buses.
So maybe we'll come back to that in a sense, and
We
that
might.
organization will
Yeah.
come back. And I guess that would come under. I asked what your greatest professional disappointment.
I think
right?
that's it.
Okay.
I think that's
And-
it.
and-
If I could have been somehow, I mean, if I could have been more Churchillian, maybe I could have been more successful. But who knows?
Yeah.
Right.
And what about your greatest joy? And I think you mentioned who you admired most professionally, but
No, I
if
don't think I did.
Okay, I thought it was the. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
Go
and that
for
sort
it.
of goes back, actually, David. It goes back to some of the early stuff. With,
Okay.
so I can't discuss. I saw that question, "How do you meet your wife?" And until I go back home and ask her permission, I can't really do
Okay.
that. But that's the person who I know it's a politically correct answer, but she's a plastic surgeon. And she has all those properties that you have to admire. So tremendous work ethic, really, and we have some great conversations, dinner time conversations.
Well, people say opposites attract, but if you're like somebody, it's a lot better.
Yeah,
And it
no,
attracts-
exactly
it
right.
attracts for a
It's
while.
right,
They're like, what was I thinking?
Yeah, right. That's exactly right.
What would you give of words of wisdom to present and future generations of plastic surgeons?
Well, that's a great question as well. So that's a big, I think there's a substantial difference between what you would say to somebody who's in the embryonic stage of plastic surgery versus, So I don't really have a lot of wisdom. I got one maybe for the established plastic surgeon, but for the person who is considering a plastic surgery career or in the early years of an integrated residency or what, work hard. Some people have to learn that lesson, but work hard. That's the foundation on which you can build everything else. And the other is, this is not my idea, but to achieve the magic kingdom, you have to leave the comfort zone. You've got to leave what's comfortable. So I will hear from a couple of the people who we've trained upstate in Memphis, and they'll come to me with a case, and they'll say, but I never saw that. You never showed this to me in the residency. And my response is, yes, that's the case.
Yes.
That's our specialty, right? Yeah. And your capability to use what you already know, hit the books, you can do this case, and you will do fine. So you got to leave the comfort zone. If you don't, and you keep lopping off things that you don't feel comfortable with, you'll end up with a much more constricted practice.
And part of that is we're always pushing the edge.
Right.
And we love it because it's a creative thing. So look, you're not going to take somebody's nose and put it on the side of their face, but you may say, I'm going to do a little bit something different here. When I do this facelift, this seems, I understand the principles, so I won't violate those, but why not? What is it I want to achieve? And then we come up with these, look, in facelifts, we were at subperiosteal. That didn't work that great.
That didn't work so well.
But we did it.
But we had an idea.
We
Yeah,
had an idea.
That's the other edge of the sword.
Yeah.
I guess is that we are truly innovative, and perhaps we venture out into the territory and then
Say,
figure
what
out-
were we
Yeah,
thinking?
we're not the top of the food chain here. I'm out here with the Bengal tigers. And so the other aspect, this will be somewhat of a surprise to you, I think, a little bit, but there's so much discussion now about burnout. There really is, and I understand that. One of the hospitals where I operate a month or so ago decided once again they wanted to change the vendor for the EMR, for the electronic medical record. Yeah, so a brand new system we got, and I understand, and the kids, not kids, but the practitioners spend. The data is 2 hours in front of the monitor for every hour that they're seeing patients. We cannot tolerate that.
Right.
We have got to grab hold of that and solve it. But there is there is also some evidence that if you exercise on a regular basis, that addresses a great deal of the stress that may be responsible for burnout. So my advice is to young practitioners and residents, figure out something. And we're not all athletes since we were kids, you know, is to build something into your daily life. You know, take care of your family, take care of your professional issues, but figure out a way you can, on a regular basis, have exercise part of your life.
Do you want to say anything about the future of plastic surgery?
One of the, and I'm not sure it's 25 years, but one of the really fascinating things that are happening right now is VCA, vascularized composite, alloplastic reconstruction, and tissue engineering. And just think about it. I mean, we are on the cusp of development of tissue engineering techniques that will enable reconstruction of structures that we don't do a great job. Ears, noses, maybe faces, you know. Now, how that will then translate into what an average plastic surgeon does 25 years ago, I have no idea. I have no idea. But that's something I think we really want to keep our eyes on. And we play such an essential role. And it is sort of the quintessence of our specialty, isn't it?
Yes.
Right? I mean, that
Those
we're
new
gonna
horizons
we're
exciting.
going to worry about something that we are always going to have something to do, because it is the essence of plastic surgery. That's a problem. How do we solve it? And we have, you go to downstairs, you go to the ballroom, that room is filled with young people, and they are not all future cosmetic surgeons. They have a fascination with the specialty that you and I had. You know, it's the same thing. And the future of our specialty lies right there.
Yeah.
And I'm totally
And
confident.
maybe the survival of our specialty.
And perhaps the survival, who knows? You know, and I'm totally confident that they'll carry it off. They will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last question I normally ask is any other things you want to add, but we were talking a little bit about the aging plastic surgeon. Well, the purpose of the interviews is our icons are now kind of my age too, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
I've gone
exactly,
through some of the older ones, and
you're
now
working your way
I'm
down,
with my
right?
peers.
Yeah, right.
Is it? You mentioned about relevancy, I guess. Is
Yeah.
you know, do you love doing what you do?
I do.
What was the gist of the article?
Of the aging surgeon?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the seeds of the article were, I guess, I mean, when I reached age 70, and some of my best friends were about that age, the question that occurred to me in sort of an introspective sort of way is, why am I still interested? You know, what is the drive here? Why? And so I decided that I would interview, if I could find them, I was going to interview as many aging, senior, whatever, plastic surgeons, and to see if I could answer that question. So I interviewed 21. Some were my friends, some were members of my travel club, others were just guys I knew. And what I determined there were several common threads. The common thread for those 21 interviews were, unfortunately, they were all male. I guess I should have interviewed Mary McGrath, but I didn't. A common thread was, and on retrospect, I think now I had a better understanding, is that was a belief that we were getting better. Virtually to a last man, they all said that. You know, I believe I can operate better now than I could X number of years ago. And the other threads were enthusiasm. So I mean, what happened? Was this a final supernatant of everybody that these last 21 guys? I don't think so. I think it was the nature of the specialty. That, financially, I think all of them didn't need to continue the practice. I certainly didn't need to, although maybe in retrospect I did. I don't know.
Well, look, what we do is a blending of art and science, and it's fun.
Yeah,
I mean, that's-
exactly.
And we do it every day.
Yeah.
Every time we look at someone.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Now, the other side of the sword is, virtually none of that group had really ascertained, including myself, ascertained what they wanted to do once they did retire, or how that process was going to happen. And I think I put it in that article. There was a quote of one of those. It may well be like Dylan Thomas wrote, that I'll go raging into the night. It sounded like Dylan Thomas wrote that about his dad, and he wrote it at age 19.
Wow.
Yeah. If only he had stopped drinking, he could have really been. But anyway, so that's the other side of the sword is we don't want to work. And I think you said, as we talked before, is that you really believed that you wanted to go out on top. And I think that is the criterion. Is we don't want to be the failing surgeon whose credentials are removed, that we don't want that to happen.
Right.
And so that's the other edge. One needs to figure out, how do I sail that course? And I've been putting that sort of together. Maybe I'll write a postscript to that article.
Yeah.
But, is how to, I can ride the wave into the beach. Well, I figured out, you can't pick the wave. So how can I build a bridge to the beach?
Yeah. Well, listen, I've so enjoyed talking to you.
I've enjoyed talking with you.
And,
You're doing a great job.
We'll be on film soon, okay?
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much.
Indeed.